When I opened my eyes, I found myself 3 years past the day I had died. My husband, Evan Hayes, had moved on, fallen in love again, and proudly married another woman. The little boy I had brought into this world now called her mom with the easy affection of a child who didn't remember the difference. But my daughter Lila came running toward me instead, wrapping her small arms around Rusty. The little dog wagging its tail excitedly at my feet, her eyes soft and pleading as she whispered, "Mommy, I want to go with you." Standing in the middle of a wide American street, I still felt dizzy, disoriented, as though I had just stepped out from under the massive wheels of a speeding truck. I looked down at my hands and saw I was still clutching the stack of documents Evan had forgotten to take with him that morning. I tried calling his phone, but the line refused to connect. After a long moment of hesitation, I decided to head home. My hand trembled slightly as I slid my key into the lock and pushed the door open. The first thing I saw was a pair of slippers, neatly placed side by the entryway. They were pink, soft, and fluffy, like little clouds, but they were not mine. Before I could process that, a small dog barreled out from the bedroom, barking excitedly, circling me and tugging at my pant leg as if urging me to follow. I froze, my heart tightening. It was Rusty, the little stray Evan and I had once rescued from the streets. "Rusty, Rusty," I called softly, and his tail wagged harder. Then from behind him, a little girl with a round cherubic face appeared. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me, her wide eyes going impossibly round. "Mommy," she breathed, and I was even more stunned than she was. My daughter, who had been only 2 years old when I last saw her, was now grown enough to speak in full sentences. Her small frame filled out her gaze clear and steady. I glanced at the phone in her tiny hand and saw the numbers on the screen flash rapidly. The years skipping forward before my eyes until they stopped. Exactly 3 years later. In the master bedroom, the wedding photo of Evan and me was gone. In its place hung a framed portrait of Evan in a sharp suit, gazing down tenderly at a glowing woman in a white gown, cradling a bouquet. Her smile as bright as the morning sun. I stared at it, my chest tightening with an ache I couldn't name. Beside me, Lila clutched Rusty and tugged gently at my sleeve, her voice small and worried. "Mommy, please don't be sad." I wiped my tears quickly, lifting her into my arms with a shaky smile. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Seeing you grown and healthy like this makes me so happy. These are just tears of joy." After a pause, I asked quietly, "Where's your brother?" She curled into my arms. Rusty, now calm in her lap. "He's at the amusement park with Dad and Ms. Collins." She murmured, her voice fading. Then her eyes reddened. "It's like I already have a mom, but I don't want Ms. Collins to be my mom." Her lips trembled as she confessed. I cried, and Dad said I was being stubborn, so he didn't let me go to the amusement park. The words pierced through me like a blade. I ached for her. Just then, Rusty wriggled out of her arms and trotted toward his little bed. Lila slipped from my embrace, muttering, "Mommy, I'm heavy." From the bed, Rusty dragged out a thick photo album. Lila planted her hands on her hips, scolding him with mock sternness. "Rusty, why did you hide Mommy's album in here again?" He lowered his head and whined softly in guilt. She sat down on the floor, carefully plucking bits of dog hair off the cover, her small fingers brushing them away with the tenderness of a curator handling precious art. Then she looked up at me, her voice breaking. "Grandma said you turned into a star in the sky. Did you come back from the stars to see me? Are you going to leave again?" I knelt and stroked her hair, my throat tight. "I won't leave again, sweetheart. I'll be with you, watch you grow, and stay until you're all grown up like me." We sat together, flipping through the album, each page a window into a life I had lost. Outside voices drifted in. "Did you have fun today?" "So much fun. Next time I want to go with Mom and Dad too. When my baby brother is born, we'll all go together." The front door opened. A beautiful woman stepped inside, one hand resting protectively on her slightly rounded belly, her other arm held by a man I knew too well. Her smile lit up the room until she saw me. It froze instantly. Evan's body stiffened, the grocery bag in his hand slipping to the floor. Behind them, a small boy stepped in and closed the door gently, his innocent eyes darting between us. At that moment, Lila leapt into my arms, holding me as though afraid I might vanish again. My gaze locked with Evan's across the room, the air between us heavy with 3 years of silence, and everything left unsaid. The little boy looked up with innocent curiosity and asked Dad, Mom, "Why are you both standing at the door?" Lila immediately sprang from the floor and ran into my arms, her tiny hands clutching my waist, as if letting go might make me disappear again. I lifted my gaze to meet Evan Hayes' eyes. His voice was rough, heavy with disbelief. "Clara, 3 years is long enough for a lot to change, especially after the accident that almost took your life. I could never have imagined how I had escaped death that day, yet here I was in a world 3 years ahead of where I had left it, braced for the worst. Still, nothing had prepared me for the pain of seeing them, Evan, the children, and Aubrey Collins, looking like a happy little family. The warmth radiating from Lila's small body seeped into me, giving me the courage to face this moment. I drew a deep breath, stepped to the coffee table, and picked up the folder resting there. "You probably don't need this anymore," I said, handing it to Evan. "It's the one you forgot at home." I thought I should return it. Aubrey's face drained of color, her lips losing all warmth, as if the blood had fled from them entirely. Evan's eyes flickered in quick recognition. He hurried to guide her onto the sofa and poured a cup of hot water for her, moving with the ease of a habit long established. Then he turned and called into the hallway, "Noah, go get the throw blanket from the bedroom for your mom." But Lila only hugged me tighter, her small hands trembling against my back. She didn't need words to tell me she wanted me to know I still had her. Evan and I had been together for 7 years. In high school, I had been the quiet, diligent student who lived by her books. Falling for Evan was the boldest thing I had ever done. He was not only sharp-witted, but also the kind of boy who could handle himself in a fight. I met him one afternoon when a group of bullies cornered me in a narrow alley on my way home. He happened to be passing by, ready to step in, until he saw me face set, swinging my school bag with calculated precision, knocking each one down until they backed off, muttering curses. "If you're so good at this, go to school and make something of yourself." I had snapped at them, and they slunk away. At the end of the alley, Evan stood with his arms crossed, watching me with amusement. I was going to play hero and rescue the damsel in distress, but it looks like you didn't need me at all. I gave him a sharp look and walked past. My mother, Margaret Hayes, had always taught me that a girl should know enough self-defense to protect herself. From that day on, Evan stuck to me like a shadow. He took notes for me in class, explained the lessons I didn't understand, and before I realized it, my grades had climbed into the top 100. One day during a school assembly, I realized he had been pursuing me all along. I agreed to be with him, and we promised to get into the same college in Washington, D.C. When Lila and Noah were born, Evan sat at my bedside, his scruffy beard tickling my skin. As he kissed my forehead, his voice trembling with emotion, "Clara, you've worked so hard. Thank you for giving me our 2 little treasures. They're so tiny I don't even dare hold them yet. Let's call them Lila and Noah." It had felt like a promise forever, but promises are fragile. One day the daughter of a business partner saw him, and from the moment their eyes met, she wanted him. Learning he was married only drove her away for a while overseas to study, but now she was back. Aubrey clutched the cup in her hands so tightly I thought it might shatter, her eyes shimmering with tears. Noah returned with a blanket, carefully tucking it around Aubrey's legs, before curling up beside her like a small bird protecting its nest. My chest ached. I knew my return had come at the wrong time. These people had moved forward. I was the one still stuck in the past. After a long pause, I turned to Noah. "Do you want to come to Grandma's house with me?" He shrank back, hiding behind Aubrey, his eyes filled with quiet defiance. "You're not my mom," he said flatly. Rusty trotted around my feet, tail wagging furiously. Lila bent down to scoop him up, her grip on my sleeve tightening. "Mommy, I'm coming with you," she said with determined certainty. I understood Noah. Time had broken our rhythm. For him and for Lila, I had been gone for 3 years. For me, the last time I saw them felt like only yesterday. I had been on my way to bring the forgotten documents to Evan Hayes. Before leaving, I had bent down and kissed my 2 precious little ones on their soft cheeks. Yet here I was, 3 years later, staring at children who were now 5 years old. Children who could not help but feel a growing distance from me. Still, the way Lila clung to me had rekindled a fragile flame of hope. Even so, I understood in that moment that in this house the only ones who truly recognized me anymore were Lila and Rusty. Evan couldn't meet my eyes. My belongings had been cleared out the year before in preparation for his wedding with Aubrey Collins. Most of them had been sent to my mother, Margaret Hayes. So when I left that house, I took only Lila Rusty and a small child's suitcase Lila had packed herself. As we drew closer to my hometown, my nerves twisted tighter. When we reached the little corner store my mother ran, I saw her pulling the metal shutter down. She looked so much older, her hair streaked with silver, her posture slightly stooped, her movement slower as she locked the door. My chest tightened painfully. Lila called out with pure joy, "Grandma!" My mother turned, her face lighting up in a radiant smile until her eyes found me. The key slipped from her hand and clattered to the ground. She stood frozen for a long, long moment. I could only stand there, tears spilling down my cheeks. The woman who had once been youthful and loved beautiful things had aged so much. Lila ran to pick up the keys and handed them to her. My mother, as if trying to hide her emotions, quickly closed. The store brushed at her eyes and muttered, "You're back. Will you be leaving again this time?" As if my 3 lost years were nothing more than a trip away. I could not hold back my tears. "Mom, the house looks exactly the same. It's like nothing has changed in 3 years." My bedroom was still neat and untouched, needing no cleaning. My mother busied herself helping me put away Lila's little suitcase, then took my daughter's hand and headed for the kitchen. When I finished unpacking and turned around, Lila was standing in the doorway, her small hands cupping her round cheeks, her almond-shaped eyes curved like crescent moons as she smiled. "Mommy, dinner's ready." On the table were 3 steaming bowls of tomato and egg noodles. One was a small yellow duck-shaped bowl for Lila. Even Rusty had been given a small portion of plain noodles in his own dish. My mother set chopsticks in front of me, smiling gently. "For someone who's come home from far away, we'll have noodles instead of dumplings." Lila beamed with pride as she sat at the table. "Mommy, I peeled all the tomatoes myself and Grandma and I made dinner together." I took a bite and the familiar, comforting taste of my mother's cooking filled me with warmth. The steam from the bowl blurred my vision. "It's delicious," I said, lowering my head to take another big mouthful, blinking back tears. When I looked up, my mother was returning from the kitchen carrying a plate of sweet and sour ribs, my favorite. "I know you don't like too many noodles, so have this with it," she said. I gripped my chopsticks tightly, forcing a smile, as I divided the ribs evenly among my mother Lila and myself. "Let's eat together." After bathing Lila, I carried her smelling sweet and fresh into my mother's room. The space was as tidy and orderly as the woman who kept it. "Mom, can the 3 of us sleep together tonight?" She had her back to us and stiffened slightly at my question. I saw her slip something into her sleeve before quickly wiping at her eyes. After a pause, she turned to take Lila from my arms and answered softly, "Yes." That night, Lila lay between us, her wide eyes shining with a happiness she couldn't hide. "It's been so long since I got to sleep with you, Mommy," she whispered. I suddenly remembered the last time I'd shared a bed with my mother. It was the night before my wedding. She had talked about everything and nothing as if she wanted to stretch out the time. I had drifted off eventually, only to wake and see her silently wiping away tears. My mother loved me fiercely, and I loved her just as deeply. From my earliest memory, we had always leaned on each other. Except for the years I spent at college, we had never been apart for long. I couldn't imagine the difficulty she must have faced letting me go to start my own family. And now I couldn't imagine how she had endured these last 3 years without me. I turned my head toward her. She lay still with her eyes closed, her face calm. I gently took her hand in mine. Those hands were rough but warm and strong, the hands that had raised me from a fragile little girl into the woman I was. She wasn't asleep. She squeezed my hand lightly, passing me a familiar comfort. I smiled with quiet contentment, then whispered to Lila, "As long as you want me, I'll be here with you every day, telling you stories and helping you fall asleep." A little while later, Lila's eyes fluttered open. Her tiny arms slipped around my neck, holding tight, as if afraid that I might vanish into thin air. Her sleepy voice was soft, almost trembling. "Mommy, am I dreaming when the sun comes up? You're going to disappear again, aren't you?" I kissed her forehead gently, letting my voice become a quiet vow. "No, Lila, I'm not leaving again. I promise you I will stay with you forever." The next morning, the 2 of us were still asleep when Rusty stirred in his bed, curling back into his blanket with a sigh. After washing my face, I stepped into the kitchen. The refrigerator still held neatly wrapped wontons and greens that my mother had prepared in advance. As the pot of water on the stove rolled into a full boil, the steam rose and swirled around me, and a heaviness settled in my chest. 3 years had passed, and Evan Hayes had moved forward. Remarried, had another child, and built a new life. My son, my own flesh and blood, now called another woman upon without hesitation. They were a complete family now. I told myself this was simply how life worked, that people moved on. But somewhere deep inside, there was a blur of feelings I couldn't quite name. Was it grief, or was I only trying to hold myself together? The patter of hurried little feet broke my thoughts. Lila came running into the kitchen in her tiny dog-shaped slippers, her steps echoing against the tile. She flung herself into my arms, her small voice trembling between muffled sobs. "Mommy, oh. I thought you turned back into a star in the sky, that you didn't want me anymore." I held her close, gently straightening the collar that had bunched in her sleep. "I promised you, and I won't break that promise. I'll never leave you again." A heavier, slower set of footsteps followed, and I turned to see my mother in the doorway, breathless, her hand gripping the frame as her eyes locked on me in stunned disbelief. She stood there as if afraid that even blinking would make me vanish. I opened my arms wide and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Mom, I'm home. I'm really home. This isn't a dream." Her voice shook Clara. "Is it really you?" I smoothed the stray hairs from her forehead, feeling my eyes sting. "It's me. It's your Clara." And with that she broke. Tears streamed down her face, spilling years of pain and longing. My Clara, this isn't a dream." After we finished our bowls of wonton soup, I carried the dishes to the sink. My mother and Lila trailed after me step for step, and I couldn't help but laugh. I turned, pretending to coax my mother like a child. "Mom, how about Lila and I go to the store with you today?" Her eyes lit up, her smile blooming. I bent toward Lila and whispered, my gaze drifting to my mother's carefully styled hair. She had hidden the silver at her temples, and today she'd even put on a touch of makeup, something she almost never did. When she caught me looking, she blushed slightly and asked shyly, "It's been so long since I fixed myself up." "Do I look strange?" I grinned. "Strange, you're beautiful. A few days from now, I'll take you to get a new haircut. People will think you're my sister." The compliment straightened her spine and lit her eyes with a spark I hadn't seen in years. My mother had always loved fashion, and today she'd braided Lila's hair into a neat fishtail with a tiny pink flower pinned at the end. I crouched so Lila could reach me, and she touched my hair gently, her eyes shining. "Mommy, now we look alike." My heart melted at her joy. "Yes, sweetheart, we're just the same." We opened the store later than usual that morning, and by the time the three of us arrived at the small neighborhood market, it was nearly 9. From a distance, I spotted someone sitting alone on the bench outside. As I stepped closer, I recognized Aubrey Collins. She sat hunched, her head bowed, lost in thought. The vibrant light I remembered in her eyes seemed dimmed now. Lila tilted her head and whispered. Miss Collins. Aubrey's head jerked up. When her gaze landed on me, she rose awkwardly to her feet, her hands tugging at the sleeves of her sweater. "Clara," she murmured. Her eyes drifted past me to my mother, and she offered a polite Mrs. Hayes. My mother's smile cooled instantly. What Evan didn't know was that I had met Aubrey long before he had. That afternoon, the sun was sinking low, painting the small park in shades of amber. As I passed by, I caught sight of Aubrey Collins. She was wearing a fitted dress, her face pale with panic, running out from a narrow path, as though something terrifying was chasing her. Behind her, 2 men followed closely, their eyes leering and vile. The park was nearly empty. And when she saw me, her eyes lit up for a fleeting second, before dimming again, as if she was afraid that coming to me would only drag me into trouble. She bit her lip and turned to run in another direction, but I called out her name. Without a second thought, I stepped forward and landed several sharp punches that sent the 2 men staggering. They backed off, muttering curses, and finally bolted. Aubrey stood trembling behind me, her small hands clutching the fabric of my shirt like a lifeline. When the danger was gone, her body sagged with relief. But then she suddenly wrapped her arms around me and began sobbing uncontrollably. Her words came between hiccups, thanking me over and over, apologizing for wetting my shirt, saying she would try to calm down, but that she was still so afraid. I could only pat her shoulder gently, the same way I used to comfort Lila and Noah when they were frightened. "It's all right," I murmured. "They're gone now. You're safe." As I walked her home, she glanced down at her dress and asked in a defeated tone if it was her fault for wearing something like this. Clara, should I not dress this way? My brow furrowed immediately. No, Aubrey. What they did has nothing to do with what you wear. That is your choice, your freedom. People who use a woman's clothes as an excuse for their own twisted thoughts are simply looking for a way to justify their malice. You don't blame the victim for a predator's thoughts, but you must always be careful, take steps to protect yourself. We can't control what's in their heads, but we can protect our own safety. We exchanged contact information before parting, but I didn't think I'd see her again. The next time we met was 3 years later in front of Evan Hayes' company building. She was holding a large bouquet of roses, looking radiant and confident, but when she learned that I was Evan's wife, her face flushed deep red, and she seemed to wish the ground would open beneath her feet. Perhaps at that time, she never imagined that 3 years later she would actually become his wife. From my mother, I learned what happened after the accident. The car's front end had been crushed beyond recognition, yet the rescue team never found me inside. It was as if I had vanished into thin air. Everyone assumed that in such a situation I could not have survived. 3 months later, Aubrey returned from abroad and quietly stayed by Evan's side. She endured his coldness without complaint, took care of Lila and Noah with patience, especially when my mother could no longer manage alone. My mother said that when Noah was 4 years old, he began calling Aubrey Mom. We were sitting on a park bench near my home. When she told me about it, her voice tinged with unease. Noah had been burning with fever in the hospital, calling out for his mother over and over until his voice was hoarse. No one could calm him down. I couldn't bear it anymore, so I said yes, she confessed, gripping her hands so tightly, her nails dug into her palms. Even the word death seemed too heavy for her to utter. Clara, I never wanted to replace you. I took your photo album from Evan's mother, the one with your pictures from childhood, and showed it to Noah. I told him this is your real mother. Lila still clings to that album every night. Her voice broke. I handed her a warm bottle of milk, cutting her off gently. Thank you for caring for them these past 3 years. Not just Evan and the kids, but my mother too. She told me when she heard I was gone, she was so dazed, she forgot to lock up the store. You were the one who found someone to help her. Aubrey shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. It was the least I could do. I looked down as I twisted the cap from my drink, then glanced back up. The day I came back, you took Noah to the amusement park. Why didn't you bring Lila? I'd heard from my daughter that she had refused to call Aubrey Mom, and that it had made Aubrey cry. Evan had called Lila stubborn and disobedient. Aubrey lowered her gaze, her tone heavier now. I owe Lila an apology. She's been independent and strong-minded since she was little. She never accepted me, and I can't blame her for that. She has always opposed me no matter how hard I tried. Because of that, she and Noah fought constantly. Her fingers tightened around the bottle of milk, her voice growing quieter. Clara, you are a good person. Sometimes I cannot stop myself from wondering if you will never come back. Evan and Noah have already accepted me, so why is Lila still unable to? These thoughts circle in my mind for so long that they begin to feel like a part of me. I know I came into this family in a way that could be seen as opportunistic. I know that in some ways, my presence has been a kind of quiet cruel. I handed her a piece of paper and let out a slow sigh. I don't hate you, Aubrey, I told her softly. The fact that you can be honest enough. Besides, when I brought Lila home that day, Margaret was closing the shop. You were the one who called to remind her, weren't you? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Lila is only 5 years old. I couldn't let such a little girl stay home alone. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she spoke, her voice trembling. Noah is still so young, I didn't think about it. Evan and I were so worried we couldn't even enjoy our time away. We rushed right back. She paused, her eyes heavy with something unspoken. I just didn't expect you to still be alive. To be standing here in front of us again. Clara, isn't it strange that I'm telling you all this? I shook my head gently, my expression soft. Aubrey glanced down at the paper and the small bottle of milk in her hand. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, her eyes catching the light, glowing with a sudden and unexpected brightness. You really are soft-hearted. If you had said you hated me, I'd probably just hide in some corner and cry my heart out. But then I'd dry my tears and come right back pretending nothing happened, trying to make peace with you again. Her gaze drifted away for a moment as if lost in thought. But now, what do I do? I honestly don't know. If I give up on Evan, it feels like I'm betraying myself. But if I don't give up, could we ever go back to the way things were? She looked at me with a seriousness that almost startled me. No matter what you decide, I'll accept it. I exhaled softly, then spoke in a low voice. Aubrey, you're pregnant. You shouldn't be running around like this. Call Evan, ask him to come pick you up. He arrived quickly. Evan moved to support her, helping her stand, with such careful precision, taking the items from her hands, as if they were fragile glass. Every gesture was deliberate, his usual coolness replaced by a gentler touch. There was no denying it, Evan had poured his heart into Aubrey. If he hadn't, he wouldn't always be nearby, ready to appear the moment she needed him. The shadows beneath his eyes were deep. Perhaps my unexpected return had kept him awake all night. Clara, his voice was low. I came to take Aubrey home. Would you like to come along and see Noah? I knew it well, Evan was still Evan, but he was no longer mine. I smiled faintly. No. I promised Margaret and Lila I'd spend the whole day with them. Last night Lila had secretly called Noah, but the boy had only cried in anger, refusing to call me Mom. Lila, frustrated, had hung up immediately. When she came to find me, her face was tinged with guilt. I'm sorry, Mom. Noah wouldn't listen to me. I crouched down, brushing a hand gently over her hair. That's my fault, sweetheart. I've been gone too long. I don't blame you, and I don't blame your brother either. You're still little. You shouldn't have to worry about things like this. Let me take care of it. All you need to do is be happy and grow up well. A heaviness settled in my chest. Lila was far too perceptive for her age. She knew, she understood, she saw it all too clearly. If I hadn't been absent for 3 years, she might have been like Noah, innocent and carefree, untouched by such burdens. Just then, Rusty, our little dog, bounded toward me, tail wagging in delight. He leapt into my lap, making a low, affectionate sound, as if he were trying to speak. My laugh made him tilt his head, and then he turned politely toward his former owners, offering 2 soft barks, as if in greeting. In the distance, I saw Lila in a sweet little dress, her face glowing, her eyes bright like the morning sun. Mom, I came to take you home, she called out with excitement. The small general store was quiet without customers. I carried a box from the back storage room, while my mother stood beside me, carefully arranging items on the shelves. Lila sat behind the counter, her little legs swinging as she hummed an unrecognizable tune filled with joy. Rusty curled up at her feet, occasionally giving a soft bark as though adding to her melody. My mother turned to me, her voice calm yet serious. Clara, have you made up your mind? My hand stilled for a moment. She had clearly thought about this for a long time before continuing. If you want things to be like they were before, once the identity papers are sorted out, we'll go talk to Evan. But if you don't want to go back, if you want to leave him, I won't object. With this shop, I can still take care of you. If you want to fight for custody of Lila and Noah, no matter how hard it is, I'll be right there with you. And if you don't want to, if you'd rather live on your own, I'll support that too. Her words sank into me slowly, each one heavier than the last. I looked at her, feeling the weight of my choices pressing against my chest. My return had stirred so many emotions, so many wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. Yet here she was, offering nothing but quiet strength, no matter which path I chose. My mother lowered her voice so that Lila would not hear, yet every word was soft, steady, and full of strength. Clara, as long as you are happy, no matter what choice you make, I will stand by you. She had always been the one behind me, lifting me up when I stumbled, quietly pushing me forward when I lost my way. Hearing her voice, something inside me swelled with courage I had not felt in a long time. I spoke with a certainty that surprised even me. I want to leave Evan Hayes. I want to fight for custody of Lila. I want to live with you, Mom, and start over. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, warm and golden, wrapping around us like a promise. In that moment, I realized that Lila, Rusty, and my mother were all I truly had and all I truly needed. She froze for a brief second, then smiled an honest, heartfelt smile. Her eyes shone with pride. Clara, you make me so happy. Many years ago, when people tried to force me to give you up, I refused. God gave me a daughter like you, and I would never trade that for anything. You never broke down, never blamed the world, and even in the worst storms, you so carved your own path. Her warm hand brushed my cheek, her voice thick with love. I am proud of you. My mother was born in a small rural town and was one of the rare girls to make it to college. But during one summer break, she was attacked by an older bachelor in the village. She kept the evidence, pressed charges, and put him behind bars. His family, humiliated and enraged, spread filthy rumors everywhere. My grandfather, a man who had always valued sons over daughters, saw her as a disgrace to the family. They wanted to marry her off quickly, but then they found out she was pregnant. Alone and ostracized, Margaret Hayes stood her ground. "I did nothing wrong by sending a rapist to prison," she told them. "I will keep this baby. I do not care about the whispers. I do not care how hard life becomes. I will never regret it. You may be my parents, but I will never go back to what you call a family." The villagers gossiped that she was unnatural, not only refusing to marry, but choosing to give birth to the child of a criminal. They said she was crazy. But the truth was, my mother had always been fiercely clear-headed. As a child, she had fought to go to school when her parents tried to keep her home. She made enough noise to reach the county education office. When she was accepted into a top high school, her parents tried to pull her out to work, but she struck back in the only way she could, by injuring her 2 younger brothers with a rock, forcing her parents to let her continue. She escaped her family when she went to college, yet the shadow of that so-called kinship followed her. Then came that older bachelor, whose eyes had always lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. Life tested her at every turn, but she never surrendered. By the time she earned her graduate degree, people tried setting her up with a man. She politely saw him to the door, but he gossiped afterward, speaking in a voice he thought a child could not understand. What is wrong with her? She is a used woman with a child, and the man was willing to overlook that, yet she acts high and mighty. We moved soon after. To my mother, I was never a burden. She always told me I was a gift from God. In my childhood memories, I felt no less than any other child with both parents. Whatever my friends had, she worked to give me too. Because of what she had endured, she enrolled me in self-defense classes so I could protect myself. When I came home with bruises, she would cry silently as she dabbed ointment on my skin, her hands trembling with a mixture of pain and fury. She gave me every ounce of love she had. I looked up at her now, noticing how her beauty remained despite the fine lines at her eyes and the silver strands in her dark hair. To me, she would always be the best mother in the world. My throat tightened. Mom, you will always be my pride. That mid-autumn festival, when I came back to stay with her, I thought for a while before picking up my phone to call Evan. I asked if he had time to take Lila to the amusement park. I wanted to make up for the moments our daughter had missed, and at the same time, I needed to tell him my decision. Evan Hayes stayed silent on the phone for a long time before he finally agreed to meet. At the park, I saw Noah again. He stood there a little awkward, his small hands twisting together, before he finally lifted his head and called me Mom. His voice trembled as he said, "Mom, Miss Aubrey told me that when you had me and Lila, you went through a lot of pain. She said you never abandoned me, that you always loved me. She told me you traveled a very long, hard road and eventually came back to us. I think that road must have been so hard to walk. I once walked a long way myself until my heels tore and I lost my shoes. When I saw Dad that day, I felt so small and hurt. So you must have gone through even more. I'm sorry, Mom. I shouldn't have made you sad." He hesitated for a moment, then gently tugged on my sleeve. I bent down instinctively, and he shyly pressed his cheek against mine. "Welcome home, Mom," he whispered. Then quickly pulled away as if embarrassed and hid behind Evan. Lila stood nearby with her hands planted on her hips, letting out a proud little hum. But a moment later she skipped toward me, slipping one of her small hands into mine and the other into Evan's. Her face softened into the kind of pure innocence I rarely saw from her. Noah grabbed Aubrey's hand, his eyes filled with admiration as if she were someone to look up to. Lila, generous in her own way, let go of my hand and told him, "You can hold Mom's hand and I'll hold yours." Aubrey's eyes lit up with joy as she gave Noah a little encouraging push. She praised Lila for being so brave, even daring to want to try the roller coaster. Of course she was too small, and the attendant turned her away gently. Still, she was thrilled. All day long, Lila's face was glowing with a radiant smile that never faded. Seeing her so happy made me forget any trace of exhaustion. After a while, we stopped to rest. Aubrey excused herself to the restroom. Noah wanted ice cream, but Lila had gone limp against me, her head resting in my lap. As she pouted, "Mom, I want ice cream too." I tapped her nose playfully and said with a smile, "All right, you little lazy bones, I'll get it for you." As I walked away, I could feel Evan's gaze on me, steady and thoughtful. But when he looked back toward Lila, he heard her soft voice calling Dad. She was holding a big stuffed bear, gazing up at him. Evan crouched down to meet her eyes. "Dad, you and Mom are getting divorced, aren't you?" She asked, her tone calm, as if she were simply confirming something she already knew. Evan froze. He had always known Lila was a bright child, but he had not expected her to grasp the truth of adult matters so clearly. "Yes," he admitted quietly. And even as he said it, the thought of me still caused an ache in his chest. I had been the woman he loved for 7 years, the one he had promised forever to. It had taken him 3 years to accept my absence, and now that I was suddenly here again, it felt like fate was mocking him. In the last 2 days, a thought had crossed his mind more than once. What if he had never remarried? But he pushed it away each time, reminding himself that it would not be fair to Aubrey. Still, was it fair to me? Lila looked at him seriously. "Grown-ups always say that husbands and wives live together and raise their kids together. But now your wife is Miss Aubrey. You and Mom won't be living together anymore. And Noah really likes Miss Aubrey, so maybe Mom should have custody of me." Evan was silent for a long moment before he asked Lila, "Who told you all this?" She shook her head and answered evenly, "When told me. Isn't it obvious?" His voice turned husky when he asked, "Are you disappointed in me?" She shook her head again, her small voice steady but gentle. "You didn't do anything wrong. Mom doesn't blame you, and I don't either. And even if you and Mom split up, Mom will still be my mom, and you will still be my dad. That won't ever change. It's not like you'll stop loving me just because you and Mom aren't together anymore, right?" Evan's chest tightened. He reached out and smoothed her hair, his words deliberate and solemn. "You will always be my little girl, the one I love the most." Lila's eyes brightened instantly, reflecting the same light as mine. She nodded hard, then said softly, "I believe you, Dad. But I'm sorry, I guess I'm selfish. I just want to live with Mom." Her confession hung in the air, heavier than her small voice suggested. Evan studied her face, perhaps realizing for the first time that even a child's heart could know exactly where it belonged. When I promised my mother I would protect her, and my daughter promised to protect me, I felt a quiet strength binding us together. When I returned with Noah, I noticed the way Evan's eyes lingered on me, a mix of complexity and something that tasted faintly of bitterness. Lila gazed up at him with the purest innocence, and I reached over to pinch her cheek, choosing not to ask what she might have said to her father. When she was ready to talk, she would. Evan drove us home in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound between us. Lila clutched a teddy bear nearly her own size and bolted into the house the moment we arrived, eager to show it to my mother. In the back seat, Aubrey and Noah had fallen asleep somewhere along the drive, their heads tilted toward each other. The streets outside were quiet shadows stretching long in the fading light. Evan stepped out of the car and stood in front of me. "Clara," he began, but I cut him off. "Evan, in a few days, let's finalize the divorce papers." For 3 years, while everyone believed I was dead, he had remarried without obstacle. He and Aubrey were free to wed, and no one questioned it. But now that I had returned, I wasn't even sure if their marriage was legally recognized, and honestly, it didn't matter. The divorce between us was inevitable. I had wrestled with the decision endlessly, but once the words were out, they seemed lighter, even as they left a deep ache in my chest. 7 years of love doesn't simply dissolve because you will it to. Evan looked at me steadily. "Clara, it's my fault. If I had just waited," "Don't," I interrupted again, unwilling to hear more. From the corner of my eye, I caught Aubrey awake in the back seat, silently watching his back. It felt like everything needed to end right there. Promises that could never be kept didn't need to be spoken again. I stepped back, closing the distance, not with my body, but with finality. "Evan, this is where we stop." Neither of us was truly to blame. Fate had dealt us a cruel hand, forcing us apart in ways we couldn't control. Despite everything strange I had endured, I was alive. That meant I could rebuild. To renew my identity papers, I had spent weeks gathering documents, waiting in lines, collecting signatures. Eventually it was done, and along with it, our divorce was finalized. Evan handed me the decree, along with a large sum of money and 3% of his company shares. His business had grown significantly in my absence, and those shares meant Lila and I would never have to fear homelessness or poverty. I accepted without protest. "Clara," he said hesitantly, "even if we can't be husband and wife, we can still be friends, right?" I didn't answer. I would fulfill the responsibilities of an ex-wife, but beyond matters involving Lila. I would keep my distance to avoid giving Aubrey any reason for doubt. At Lila's request, I legally changed her name to Kyla Hayes. I used half the money I'd received to buy a bankrupt fitness center. My plan was to turn it into a women's self-defense school. Every time I looked at my mother, I thought about all she had endured, and I knew I wanted to create a space where women could learn to protect themselves. I had the time, I had the resources, and I wanted to make a difference. While devoting myself to Kyla's happiness, I would also pour my energy into this cause. During the renovations, my mother insisted on helping, though she claimed she couldn't do much. She brought trays of food and cold drinks to reward the workers, her voice full of warmth and encouragement. Her kindness seemed to make the air itself lighter, and the workers pushed themselves harder, smiling as they labored. Sometimes she would hand me tools, and every time she managed a small task, she looked so pleased with herself that she didn't even notice when she dropped something. One afternoon, I bent down to pick up a handkerchief she had accidentally dropped. It was folded neatly soft from years of wear. A sudden impulse made me open it. Inside was a small amulet for safety and a photograph. In the picture, I was wearing my graduation gown, clutching a bouquet of flowers, smiling brightly, and waving at someone beyond the frame. As my fingers brushed the amulet, something inside me shifted. Like a bolt of lightning splitting the sky, fragments of forgotten memories began to click into place, each piece slotting into the next, until I could see the whole image clearly. I suddenly remembered where I had been for the past 3 years. The truth was, I had died in that car accident. My body had been burned beyond recognition, nothing left but charred remains. Everyone was completely devastated. Evan Hayes collapsed over my lifeless form, refusing to accept what had happened. He clung to the white sheet covering me until they had to pull him away in agony. My mother could barely stand, her eyes empty and unfocused, and a second later she fainted only to be caught and helped into a chair by those nearby. Lila and Noah were still too young to truly understand, but it was as if they sensed something was terribly wrong. They cried uncontrollably, calling out for me through sobs and hiccups. Even our little dog Rusty became uncharacteristically aggressive, baring his teeth and growling at anyone who came too close. He dragged one of my old shirts into his bed, whimpered softly, then curled up tightly inside it as if guarding the last piece of me. My spirit hovered near them, powerless to do anything but watch. I could only see Evan and Noah taking slow, painful steps toward healing, while Lila and Rusty clung to their memories of me, yet tried to keep moving forward. My mother, however, chose to live inside the past, willingly letting herself be left behind. I could not bring myself to let go of Lila and Noah, just as she could not let go of me. Later, when Evan remarried, my mother did not attend the wedding. She sat in her living room with the photo album in her lap, gently tracing her fingers over each picture. Over the years, the edges of that album had worn and faded from being turned so often. Neighbors would try to comfort her, reminding her that 3 years had passed, that Evan had even remarried, and that I had been such an understanding daughter. They told her that if I knew she was still hurting like this, I would not be happy. My mother would simply lower her head without replying. Yet her eyes could never hide the deep, unshakable sorrow she carried. While the rest of the world moved forward, she remained trapped in memories, never ceasing to love me. God once said, "The reason I could not bear to leave this world was because of the love that still lingered here, quiet but constant, like a stream that never stops flowing." It was that love that tied me to this place, refusing to let me go. It was my mother's love. She once told me about a dream she had. In it, I had not survived the accident, and all that remained was an unrecognizable, blackened body. She remembered that when I was 6 years old, she had still been so young herself. Someone had asked her once if she would be willing to trade her own future happiness for my safety, and she had answered without hesitation. Of course. From then on, she held on to a blessed talisman, as if it were a lifeline, praying day and night for God to return me to her. The pain and despair from that loss haunted her whether she was awake or asleep until the day she saw me sitting in my room putting on my wedding makeup. That morning, Lila, who was 7 by then, rested her chin in her hands and gazed at me with admiration. "Mom, you look so beautiful today. I bet Uncle Luke will be surprised when he sees you." My soon-to-be husband was the older brother of a young woman from my women's self-defense class. He had been nothing but kind to me, and he treated Lila with genuine affection. His younger sister, a bright girl of 16 or 17, had somehow become best friends with Lila, despite the difference in their ages. My mother never quite understood how a teenager and a child could bond so closely, but it warmed her heart. His parents adored me as well, and because they loved me, they naturally extended that same affection to Layla. My daughter was clever and charming, and I had learned to be resilient and resourceful enough to ensure we could build a good life together. Happiness and contentment filled my mother's heart that day. Evan and Aubrey Collins attended the wedding as friends of the bride, even bringing a thick red envelope as a gift. Lila was the flower girl scattering petals with a shy smile, while Noah sat beside my mother, quietly chatting with her. A neighbor sitting next to her leaned over and asked, "Now that Clara's married, have you thought about finding someone for yourself after all these years?" My mother laughed softly, shaking her head without answering. Instead, she picked up the communal chopsticks and carefully selected my favorite dishes, placing them neatly onto a clean plate so she could bring them to me when I had a moment. Years ago, when she first learned she was pregnant with me, she had resented the child that came from a relationship that was far from ideal. But as the months passed and she felt me growing inside her, she would rest her hand on her belly and feel an unfamiliar tenderness bloom in her heart. When I was born, I brought Noah's warmth and joy into her cold, quiet life. It was not that no one had ever tried to introduce her to someone new, but she had never seriously considered remarriage. She always worried about whether she could raise me well, whether I would receive enough love, and whether if she married and had another child, she might unintentionally love me less. She had chosen to keep me, and with that choice came a promise to take full responsibility for me for the rest of her life. That promise shaped everything she did. She decided I would grow up with her love as the one constant, undivided, and unwavering. Living with another man was never part of her plan. Instead, she poured her energy into running a small convenience store, working tirelessly to be my safe harbor and Lila's too. As the wedding reception came to a close, my tall, broad-shouldered groom bent down to lift the heavy weight of my gown's train, easing my burden. I placed my hand on his shoulder, leaning in to whisper something meant only for him. Lila stood between us in her sparkling princess dress and tiny crown, cheerfully raising her arms in a V for victory. Rusty, freshly groomed in a little bow tie, wagged his tail with delight. The four of us stood together under the glow of the stage lights, a complete family framed in gold. My mother lifted her camera and captured the moment, sealing it in a frame where it would remain forever a testament to love loss and the resilience that binds us all.